In the previous video, we found out how a camera works and the three settings that control the exposure of a photograph: the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. If you're new to photography, I would suggest to watch that video first so that you can understand the basics of what exposure is. For this episode, we will take a closer look at the aperture and how we can use it in creative ways to give our photographs a certain look that we want. So if you're ready, let's dive in. Hello there, my name is Patrick and I come from a small island country called Singapore. Whether you have already picked up a camera or you're just starting out, I would like to help you along your journey of discovering the wonders of photography. This is Photography for Everyone, where your next adventure is just a click away. Let's start with a recap of what the aperture is. The aperture is an opening in the lens of the camera which controls the amount of light that passes through. A bigger aperture allows more light to pass, while a smaller one lets in less light into the camera. Therefore, we can use the aperture to control the exposure of the photograph. In most modern cameras, you can set the aperture by turning a dial or pressing a button on the camera body. The aperture setting will then be displayed on the LCD panel, the rear screen, or in the viewfinder. In some cameras, there is a setting called Aperture Priority, where you control the size of the aperture while the camera sets the shutter speed and ISO to get the desired exposure. How the aperture is set and displayed varies from camera to camera, so make sure to go through your camera's instruction manual on how to set the aperture for your particular model. You may have noticed that the aperture setting is shown as a number with the letter F in front of it. This is the F number of the lens, which is more commonly known to photographers as the f-stop. The f-stop is simply a way to express how big or small the aperture of the lens is. The f-stop number and the size of the aperture has what we call an inverse relationship. This means that a smaller f-stop number like f1.5 would indicate a larger aperture size, while a larger f-stop number like f16 indicates a smaller aperture. So we already know that the aperture can control the amount of light entering the camera, but what else does it do? Another effect that the aperture controls is called the depth of field. Depth of field is basically how much of the photograph is in focus from the front to the back. Do note that depth of field is also controlled by two other factors, which are focal length of the lens and the distance of the subject to the camera. However, for this video, we will focus on how aperture affects the depth of field. A small f-stop number, such as f1.4, f2, and f2.8 will result in a narrow depth of field. Let's say we are taking a photograph of a person who is near to the camera with a background that is far away. A narrow depth of field means only the person will be in sharp focus, while the background behind will be blurred or out of focus. A narrow depth of field is useful in situations where you want to bring attention to a particular subject, such as a person in portrait photography. On the other hand, a large f-stop number, such as f8, f11, and f16, will give you a wide depth of field. A wide depth of field means that everything from the front of the photograph all the way to the back will be in sharp focus. This would be useful in landscape or architectural photography, where you want the entire scene to be in focus. Let's recap. The aperture is an opening in the lens that lets light into the camera. We can control the size of the aperture to allow more or less light in. The aperture also controls how much of the photograph that will be in focus. This is called the depth of field. A small f-stop number results in a narrow depth of field, while a large f-stop number will give a wide depth of field. Depending on the type of photograph you are taking, you can decide how narrow or wide the depth of field should be. I hope this video has given you a better understanding of what the aperture is. and how you can use it to get a certain look in your photographs. In our upcoming videos, we will take a closer look at the shutter speed and ISO, so do consider subscribing to the channel to get the latest updates. I'm Patrick, and this is Photography for Everyone. I hope to see you next time.